It's terrible, man. Isn't that the most depressing thing ever? I've done podcasts too where you've talked for 15 minutes, right? You're not even thinking, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, why is it say, would you like to record? Like, why is that button up?
You know what it's like? It's like back
no.
in the day, the kids will never understand. Like if you were playing, you know, a franchise mode or some kind of a video game where you built up progress, and then the thing just reset or it skipped or it stopped.
Yep.
Mike, sometimes I have to leave the game. I have to go away for days. Like cause it's just like the 15-minute podcast. At that point, I know it. I felt it was good. Even if it wasn't good, I'll always think it's good because it's not there, and I don't know that I'll ever be able to make it better. You know.
40 chess, yeah. 40 chess, 40 chess, let's get it.
Yo, is that T-Dog?
40 chess, 40 chess, ay. 40 chess, this a trade show. Patreon where the trades go. Tap in and watch, that's what you came for. Ain't gotta say my name, they know my name, bro.
What's good, man?
We got McNutted in ATM. Always start off the show with a trade from them. You should always make sure that your trade is in Patreon. Why not be a Patreon? Know you wish you could spend every day with them. Tap in and say what you gonna say with them. South Harmon could fill up a stadium. Next time you log in, make sure that you bring a friend. We about to kick off, let the day begin. Go follow the socials. 40 Chess FF is posted. If your trade is an F, you get roasted. Go like and subscribe for the crew. Apple, Spotify, and the YouTube. You know Koopa got the WoRP too. Let us give you a walkthrough. 40 Chess. This is 40 Chess.
Love it, man. It's the most frustrating thing ever. But
it is.
Hey, thankfully, Koopa been working on a project. It must have saved. He didn't mess it up. Do you see? He dropped a new update to the WoRP tool last night on AMA. It was pretty awesome.
It saved a lot of years' data. Not now. I don't have to go back and just randomly look at. Like you do if you want to go all the way back to 2007, but you can do whatever you want in the multi-year WoRP tool. Man, I was playing around with it. I feel like, Mike, maybe it's just me. I'm being a little dumb here, but like, I feel like I always have to take a little more time than most with this tool to get familiar. Like I just, that's where I'm at.
Me too. Let's look at a league together, though. I want to go through this like live while we're here chopping it up.
This is going to be riveting. All right, which league we looking at?
I don't know. Pick one that we're in.
All right,
together.
I'll do it. I'll get one up here. Raptor 1523. I love typing that in. It's just so outdated.
I mean, I lost my partner in crime in a lot of leagues this year.
Well, so to be fair, Mike, I will say can I tell you who I'm not worried about at all is you. We were in like 18 leagues together or something crazy. I do feel bad. I do feel that's fine. You know what I feel bad for is Shane Joe sends me a text. He's like, everything okay, man? Like, you left all the leagues that I'm in with you. And I was like, come on, man. No way. I was like, at first I'm thinking he's like playing. And then I'm like, oh, snap. There's no way. The odds are just terrible. I'm like, well, if I do get in a startup, man, you're in it. Don't worry. And he's like, no, I get it.
You should have messed with him. It is because of you.
Well, I would have, except for like I kind of assumed it was a playful joke, and then I found out it was serious, and I'm like, oh shoot, he thinks I heard. But all right, let's pull up, Mike. Let's do this.
Should you do like the OG shit league?
I mean, if you want to, You
still in that one, right? You won that thing last year, didn't you?
I actually thought about giving it away.
Really?
Yeah, I thought about it. I mean, I didn't do it, but
after like 3 years of being terrible, you finally win one, and you give it away now.
I mean, that's why I said I thought about it. I obviously, came to my senses. But
you tried to do like the Peyton Manning, man. I'm going out on top.
Well, I'll say what I did is, Mike, I was like, you know what, I'm not giving this team up. This is just not happening. But I did make sure that I held the two teams that I felt like were the worst as like a challenge, like, see what we got with these. But I couldn't give this thing up. I've been, to your point, Mike, I had 3 years of just, no matter what happens, I eventually won, so it does pay out. But 3 years of dues before anything can even happen. That's kind of crazy.
I did have one league fold on me this year, unfortunately.
We've had, what now? I've had two with you, I think, that have folded. Is that a different one?
Yeah, different one. It was one of those random ones I joined. I think it was, do you remember Mila?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he started that one. I think he was the commish of it.
What happened? Just a lot of people all at once like weren't in, or?
I don't know. I don't know if there's too many like orphans to fill. There's like a free spot for sure. There's also, there's a person in there who joined, traded away all his draft capital, and then pieced out, after 2 years
what, Mike?
never doing anything.
Real quick before we get to the WoRP tool, this is actually a good conversation. So we had this on the BDGE. One of the questions was actually we let people ask questions to us, the audience. So somebody I don't think had the level of insight to like where we're at right now, where it's like there are some teams that if they were to bail, you're like, oh, dude, this is not going to be fun to fill. It's going to cost money to fill, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: have you thought about outside the box ways? I have a couple, but one in particular I haven't implemented, but I think if the group is aboard, it could make sense. But I'm curious if you have like, all right, the scenario is, and the question that was asked to us, you have a team that it hasn't left yet, but you're already viewing it like this is a problem, even if this like it's as soon as the manager even thinks about leaving, it's a problem. What do you do to get ahead, or what is your plan, or do you have any, is there anything you can do to mitigate this at all? As I guess the question, like any future cast ideas, and then also in the moments, is there anything you can do?
I used to think, staying 1 year ahead on league dues was fine, but even that, like, interest has kind of waned in filling orphans, even if it's free for 1 year, because they're like, I ain't paying for 25. This team's so bad. It's kind of just the culture right now of Dynasty, which is terrible. But I do wonder, I have thought about, like, everything I do going forward now is going to be 3 years minimum league dues in advance. And it's not refundable, right?
I think, too, especially at $50 league, like, that shouldn't be a big issue. Now, I do think part of it is probably for some leagues, if you go, like, $150 buy-in, like, how many people are really willing to lay down $500 today? Like, that's probably the only issue. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way. I agree. I think, to your point, when we first started, it probably wasn't an issue. But as leagues continue and the teams get more spread apart, and some teams are just, even if the values aren't that awful, someone looks at that orphan and says, I don't want that. I don't want that kid. I don't want that kid,
Here's the other thing that I think would make it interesting, too, and Sleeper needs to get their shit together on this part, too, is the ability to do a dispersal draft. That's easy, right? I don't have to have a damn Google sheet.
Yeah, that's what I actually like about multiple, though. Now, to your point, if it's too many, like if that was the problem, I like when it's multiple because the dispersal draft seems like the best way to get orphans into it, like they're being a part of the draft, right? But
well, even that, like you could have basically what you can have. I've seen in other leagues. You may only have one orphan, Adam, but you'd be like, we're going to, if any other team wants to throw all their players back, of course, and start with the dispersal,
Sure. And
people have such a great thing with drafting. Maybe they don't really like where their team is. It's not terrible, but they're like, oh man, well, I'd love to have some draft picks in this class, and part of the dispersal is the other team's got draft picks.
Mike,
24 picks, something like that.
I want to get right back to this point, but you made a comment that it's kind of the culture. What did you mean by that?
It's the culture, man. A lot of people who claim to be in the dynasty space also really just approach things as 1 year windows, right? They're only looking at it as a glorified redraft. And it's kind of built up that way, right? Because you have other people who are long-term dynasty players. We've done a pretty good job, at least in our community, getting people away from that, like, I'm taking them just because of age, or I'm taking them because I'm going to hold them for 5 or 6 years, but get them out of that mindset and thinking about long-term value. So like you and I, it's no, Keenan Allen's a great player, right? Like he scores fantasy points for us. It's awesome. Mike Evans, kind of the same thing. Cooper Kupp, those kind of guys. But also if I got the great value for Cooper Kupp or Mike Evans or Keenan Allen in the offseason, I'm moving them. I'm going, yeah, does it hurt my chances in 24 of winning? Probably. Does
but you're also
up better for 2025? Yeah, definitely.
But you're also knowing too, like maybe this asset I'm taking, I can turn it into something that isn't Cooper Kupp, and maybe I get right back into production and contention. Like it's an asset at the end of the day. So
Right.
Now I think
you used to just have a handful of people, right, kind of competing every single year. Like we know we got them in the Discord. We chide them.
Well, yeah, we found out the hard way. Like when we first ramped up, I think it was we did 10 plus, and there was a what do you want to call it? A recurring offenders
manager. Yeah, recurring offenders. Yeah, but those are a little bit of a different breed because those people come in and they're willing to like compete every single year, and their teams are terrible. At the end of it, but
right.
They stick it out. They never leave you high and dry. Right? Like those are stand-up people. Those are stand-up dynasty managers. I'm fine if that's the way you want to play. It's the ones who have like infiltrated, who go, oh, I can get an advantage, because I just trade all my picks, and I can do all this, and I just buy old assets, and I treat this like a redraft league, and then at the end of the year, if I don't win it, oh well, I'm out. See you later. Have fun.
Yeah, I think
on to the next. Anybody got a startup going? Like those are the people that I despise.
That's what I was going to pivot to. That is, I think it's in unison though. You did a good job of illustrating that. I think it's I think the majority of gamers, like when I first started playing, you made mention when I first had 2 leagues, right, and then I got into more leagues. That jumped to I think it was 8 or 10. I remember pretty vividly, like there were certain managers and certain teams that you could say, all right, like you can tell, not that there'd be a problem that they'd leave, but like you could tell right away, like they have a clear calling card of going for it, pushing in assets. Whatever it's going to happen, what's going to come to pass is going to come to pass. They're going for it. And honestly, I still don't have a problem with it. I think the reality, though, is the game, to me, when I first started playing, let me just talk about myself. There was just the way that people value assets, the way that they're willing to look at windows, everything's shortened the cycle. Like, it is now, like, I think there's a lot of the dynasty community, and like I've literally talked to people that I'm pretty close with that have their own spin on this, their own way of viewing it, where I'll call it redraft plus. Like it's, you don't want to get, they don't really want to get too far away from what the production looks like. They want to basically be able to feel like they're still closer to having a team that produces right now in assets, because they don't want to tear it all the way down. And I think that combined with the fact that the reality is, whether you think it or not, drafts are fun as hell, man. Like, yeah. I'm this year, this offseason, the hardest part for me is basically not. Well, I'll admit, I didn't even want to get rid of those teams, and every time I sat down to look at them, it was like, man, I'm not giving away this team with C.J. Stroud. No way. Like any asset, you could just. I'm not doing it. So I had a hard time picking them. But once I actually picked those teams and did that, then it's like, all right, now I have to not just do that, but I have to be a little bit more, I don't even know what the word is, disciplined, really. Like, I want to go draft, but I have to, like, hold myself back. If I'm going to be responsible and stay at the numbers I want to stay at, I can't be out here going willy-nilly doing, 20 startups like we did, 15, whatever it was. Like, you can't do that. And the reality is, if you have a bunch of teams that you're pushing in, and then you have the ones that you don't like, that's a mess. All right, I'm going to leave that because I want to go do more drafts, and then the ones that are good, even if that's not like the intent, or it's not made from the jump to be a, crime thing, like it's not intentionally done that way, that's what the result is. And I don't know, I think every league is probably going to be different. I think every group of people will be different. Every manager will be different that runs it, commissioner. But Mike, that's where I think for me, an economy becomes important again, where it's like the way I play. You already know this. I mean, people basically say I'd prefer to rebuild, and that's the truth. But Mike, if I'm going to play if I don't know the people, tearing it down like I did in this league, we're about to get into WoRP here in a minute, like. I'd be an idiot. The league's probably gonna fold when I have all the cards, right? Like, it's just, I think knowing the people in your league is important. And if you don't know the people in your league, you should be pretty cautious about how you're moving. Reality.
Yeah, for sure. Really depends anymore for me, especially like who the commish is. right? Are they stand-up people or not?
Yep.
Big shout-out to our friend of the show, personal friend of mine, Kevin K-Bach.
K-Bach's a dude, man.
He's awesome, man.
Yeah.
But if he asked me to join, as long as it's a best ball league, he knows this. He messages me sometimes for the lineup leagues. I tell him to piss off. I don't do that no more. But if it's a best ball league and it's run by him, it doesn't have to be run by me, but I understand that league's not going to fold within 3 years. So, yeah, I can go in and just draft all rookie picks if I want and trade everything away that's not tied down. I join a random off of like a Twitter DM sometimes. I'm with you. I'm a little more hesitant. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I've had a handful of these, right? I've even had some people, stand-up people that I think, right? Some unintended drama happens within the league, and all of a sudden that league's folding within a year.
Mike, I think that's too, like, to the point you're making. You all of our South Harmon leagues for the most part, like I technically commissioned one, but you probably did more work than I did to the commissioner anyway. You basically commissioned all those leagues, right? So from that, and you will do what you're probably. I mean, I don't know that many people that really commission, frankly, but I think you're as good at making sure whatever has to happen to keep this league going does. Mm-hmm. But I will say, like Mike, I've been in a couple leagues I haven't left yet, but I think I want to also if Dynasty should be fun as hell. And even in, like, I like having the banter. There's certain, like, agitating type conversations, which, like, get you a little alive. But, Mike, if it becomes when I open that league, I don't want to be a part of it, I'm going to start considering dropping, man. Like, this isn't my problem. If you guys are all being, if I don't enjoy it, there's a, bad camaraderie, bad blood, no one's making moves, all this type of stuff, I'm not going to keep spending my time in there. So I'm not telling you to be irresponsible with your teams, but I do think, given what you're talking about, what I'm saying is basically adjust accordingly. And to your point with the commissioner thing, and then we can get into this WoRP, Mike, I think the way that Dynasty used to be, it made sense, right? Like, okay, yeah, go ahead. You pay for a year ahead, and, you may have an issue here or there, but that's the reality of orphans. Right now in the current, like, Dynasty market, I think you're better off protecting, like, the extreme. And, if no problems, fine. But if you do something stupid and you want to leave, okay, we got the 150, we got the 300, whatever the buy-in is. Like, this league, every pick that Sleeper gave is done. It's paid for. So you can leave, but, this is ours.
Yeah. I don't think people are aware, too, that reputation follows you around. Like, we know who you are.
Well, that's the biggest thing too. Is
we know who you are forever.
If you do stuff one off, you'll be okay. But believe me, the Dynasty community as a whole is not big enough. If you're doing this in multiple leagues, that people won't find out. And if it's looking similar, there
are very stand-up people too in how they approach leaving the league. Like, for example, like, I'm not a huge fan of the come in, try to win. If it doesn't work out, you leave. But I've also had a certain person do it multiple times. But I keep inviting them back to any league they do, because when they leave the right way. One, it's either a team that's pretty good, or two, they're already paying the league dues for next year. Like, they're already said, like, yeah, 2025 is due right now. I know it's only 24, but here, I paid for it. I'm out. You'll be able to actually fill a free team, no matter how bad the roster is. Like, hey, would you like to come in and run this? It's completely free, right? Try it out for a year. If you can't turn it around, then we're in the same spot we were the last time. So that part I don't mind. Like, all right, I screwed this thing up. Let me pay for it, exit gracefully. And I've done that in the past. Like, there's been leagues like you talk about where they're not like super active, kind of stale, didn't really enjoy the format, like speaking of Kevin, there was a 10-team league, my disgust for that, but it was kind of interesting at the time because it was 3 quarterbacks.
You were in it?
Yeah.
But it's not anymore, right?
No, it was a 3 quarterback league, and it was a lineup league.
So that makes it closer to it's 36 QBs closer to I got you. All right.
Yeah. The problem was, like, nobody really valued quarterbacks like they should in that league. Like, they should be valued more than 12-team quarterbacks, to be completely honest, because you need 36.
Yeah, fair.
Only 32 are playing on a given week.
Right.
But it was a lineup league, and then we started getting into more content. And it was like one of those ones where I looked at it and I was like, I just don't have time to do a whole lot of lineup stuff. So told Kevin, I said I won't be back, but I open up the league safe here. Here's the payment for the next person taking over the team. It's already done. I'm out.
Yeah, I think too.
It's a way to leave a league and still show good grace. I made this commitment. I'm following through, but I do have to leave. It's just not for me right now.
No question. I mean, I think I would say this. If you have had this problem on a one-off and you're listening to this and you're thinking about it, I think if you do it the right way and people can tell, and if you're like straight up about it and you're willing to like make the leave feel good and that the situation doesn't feel bad left over, like there's not bad taste. So for example, you have a $50 buy-in, let's say like it's in yours, Mike, and you give it some time to come through, and like someone may pay the 50 for the following years, maybe not, but be prepared that if it doesn't, like here's $50, or maybe just do it off the rip. Like I didn't mean to do this, it wasn't intentional, but I know I'm not going to be a good fit for this league right now. I'm not in too many. Whatever your case is, just make sure you're leaving the right way, and then to your point, don't be repeat offender of the same crime over and over.
What about an off-the-wall kind of solution?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, that's what I wanted to get to. Yeah, great. Bring it back in.
Just thinking about it, kind of just had an off-the-wall solution possibly.
Right? I'm kind of curious.
The 2-year buy-in thing's fine. The 2-year buy-in's fine. But let's hypothetically say it's a $50 league. Those are pretty common. So like your initial league dues are going to be for 24 and 25. You got to pay $100 on startup, right? Mm-hmm. What if you change that to everybody pays an extra $10 a year?
As like a growing pot?
A growing pot, like you put it in escrow essentially, right? It's going to stay within the league safe. It's going to keep rolling over. But if somebody bails after year one, the extra that got paid pays for the new manager. So they come in completely free, right? And if you hit the 5-year mark of the league, then you can pay out the escrow, right?
Yeah, I like that. So that's similar. It's different. It's a different implementation. Andrew said basically that if it got that bad, that you could have everybody basically chip in an extra small percentage, 5-10% of what the buy-ins are collectively to help get that to keep, because otherwise the league's going to fold, right? Like if that's the case, you're keeping it from folding. Mike, let me ask you this as far as, because I think what you just said probably is a better solution. People don't like paying money up front, but if it's a small figure, now you have this. People, they don't like paying it up front, but if it's a pretty small tack on, it's like a convenience fee. People love having that money around like later. You know what I mean? To just
maybe you don't even have to do the 2 years thing, right? The 2-year window, right? Maybe it's just 1 year, but everybody pays $60 instead of $50, so you got an extra $120. And right? And if 2 managers leave, you can fill both of those completely free for the following year.
Let me ask you this, because I think on the financial side, there's definitely ways you can to work around it. To your point, you can put money up front. You can, collectively, I'll say we don't want the league to fold. Put money on the back end. Let me ask you this, as far as, because here's the thing, you probably can, and I do think if this team is. I mean, it's literally like use an orphan as an illustration. Like if you tell me I can take this kid on and everything's paid for, I don't have to worry about paying for. Like there's probably something good there, but inherently there's something about the thing that I don't like. Right? I'm probably a little hesitant on it that way. It could be 2 things. So my thing is there a way? And I don't know how this would specifically work, but my thinking initially was like, okay, the league as a whole says, in a vote, this team is pretty rough. Like we know it, that the person before, whatever, if it was foul or not, left it in bad shape. Because I think the NFL does this, and it's compensatory picks. So, all right, this is bad. Like there's going to be an implemented 201 pick to this team that kind of like goes in front of the 201. Like stuff like that, where what's the biggest problem with orphans? Typically, it's not always the case, but typically it's like you look in the cupboards, Baron. Like there's no picks and no liquidity. You're like, I don't want this. It's old assets. It's going to be hard to flip, and I have no future. All right, well, here. It's not the 101 or whatever. I don't even know if they would have the 101, but it's you add the liquidity in, right? It's like that's something I think that weirdly money can't buy, the visual of that type of thing. Again, you have to get everyone to agree with it, but it's just a thought process.
Well, Eric's MIL concept that he had was pretty good. Kind of like NIL, but with MIL.
I liked it. I was hoping more people got in. That was one of the ones I was going to commit to. I was like, all right, I like this.
Bunch of Sallies, man. What are we doing here?
People don't like change, and they don't like things they're uncertain of. So, clearly, because that had no chance.
No, it was like dead in the water.
I know.
Too confusing for smooth brain. I don't understand.
Mike, I'm pretty sure I still don't understand the shit IDP league, but I'm in it.
Nobody does. Nobody does. But
WoRP's still trying to figure it out.
That was good, where essentially you have this pool of players every single year at the end, and it's based off how often they were on a team's starting lineup roster. Right. For best ball purposes, how often they made it. If they didn't hit certain thresholds, they go in the MIL pool, and now it's a draft. Like you can spend your first round MIL pick, right, to save a player, right? Mm-hmm. But that's it. Like that, you dock that. Everybody else has the shot of it. So think about it, if you're an orphan coming in, right? That MIL pool, all of a sudden you got a roster already, right? Some of your dudes are going the MIL, but they're probably trash anyways. Now you're actually picking from like maybe the Terry McLaurin, the Mike Evans of the world. Like some of these guys, maybe it was a rookie who got hurt halfway through the season. They still got a lot of dynasty value. All of a sudden, that guy's in the MI pool, and it's not even affecting draft picks, right? It's not affecting the rookie picks that you already had. So, it's a shot every year to like really promote parity within the league and help fill like orphans incoming, which wasn't a bad idea to begin with. Now it's probably a tracking nightmare, but that's why we got Koopa making stuff like the WoRP tool. He could definitely make something to track that in sleeper leagues.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I'll say this: like, I was on board with it. I typically, this, you and I are both the way, like, screw your parody. I'm trying to be the top, man. Like, or I'm trying to be the bottom, right? But I like the setup there. And I just think sometimes what happens in the game of Dynasty? What happens in anything that you do, really? People don't like change, but what always happens? Change. The league starts to shift. The way that people play in the market start to shift. You got to kind of adapt. I think that overall there's probably – It's not a fun conversation to have, frankly. The dark secrets, or the skeletons in the closet. No one wants to talk about in Dynasty, but things to think about. Especially in the off season when it's like, all right, what's going on in my leagues? So, just being proactive. Some things you can't avoid, but I think you can always, try to improve.
For sure, definitely for sure.
I'm also really interested, Mike, to get to this WoRP because. I'm not sure. Maybe we need someone else on here to help us understand it, but maybe we'll get there together. Let's try.
That's not too bad. Doesn't seem like it's that crazy.
I know. I may not read it right the first time.
You're good, man. It's easy stuff, man. Just multi-year WoRP.
Yeah, it's 20. So I'm looking 2019 to 2023. So you can do up to 5 years or 4 years.
OG shit league. Is that what you're looking at? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're pulling so many years of data too. For people who go and look at this, just keep in mind the calculations do take a little bit longer. It's a lot more data that tool is pulling from. So, OG shit league, Adam. Multi-year WoRP. Cooper introduced us exactly what it sounds like. So we're looking at 5 years of WoRP data, and this
combined.
is on the AWoRP scale. And Koopa did say he will have a podcast explaining why he's big on AWoRP versus just true WoRP at this point.
For sure.
So, look for that in the future. Don't let us try to explain it to you. Hear from the man himself. But
we'll try, but yeah, definitely go to Koopa if there's any disparity.
The first thing about multi-year WoRP that's going to stand out to a lot of people, take the player names out. There's no player anymore. Just QB1, QB2, QB3.
Boom.
There's no player, right? So no biases come in,
yep.
Right? And if I'm telling you this quarterback is, 7th in WoRP over the last, how many years? You don't even have to... The Jordan Love thing will never come up for us in this.
I mean, we already admit, Mike, one of the fun things for me is actually learning. And I also, you never like to take one on the chin right away, but I like learning. I think the Jordan Love thing, the more I look back at it, I think we talked about this already. It's like, but why did we fight it when you didn't have to pay for the future investment?
Right.
Right? Like, I get you. Yeah, I'm with you. If WoRP for a certain player in multi-years is saying top 7, like the only way you could even really try to debate that is you're telling me this person's like injured, dead, like what? You're saying all this historical data basically is out the window. That's the only way you could say that, especially because this is a big sample size now.
Yeah, and it's just taking the averages too, like
right.
every single year for 5 years. Where did that QB1 finish in WoRP relative to everybody else, right? So for the last 5 years, at least on this one, QB1 in WoRP, number 1 player in the entire league.
One thing I was going to ask, see, like I'm already thinking about things. For example, if you're a player that, this is 2019, you're in college. So is it just going to give your 2 to 3 year sample size?
No, so it's not looking at an individual player. For example, QB1 isn't Josh Allen. It's not like it's hidden, like a mystery.
Right.
It's QB1. Whoever was QB1 in 2019, it's whoever was QB1 in 2020. Right? It's a cumulative. Right, the average of all those guys. So 1 year it could have been Josh Allen. Next year could have been Jalen Hurts. Could have been Patrick Mahomes. Could have been Josh Allen again. You know what I mean?
Like so these player names aren't necessarily as relevant.
There's no player name
on the. Maybe I'm looking at a different tab than you are. I'm sorry.
You are. Got to hit the multi-year data, buddy.
Yeah, no. I was actually talking more on the multi-year graph. Actually, still Got it. Multi-year data. Let me click over here, though. Let's get on the same page for everyone listening. Don't confuse them, too.
Yep.
My bad.
I was like, there's no names on here.
No. We were talking different pages. Everyone listening, we're on the multi-year data, except for me. So I'm on there now. Got it.
So in this league, over the last 5 years, QB1 is the number 1 WoRP player, a WoRP player, in the entire format for this league.
This is kind of cool. I like this one.
Not by a ton. RB1 is actually right up there with them. What is that? Thousandths behind? 3.035 versus 3.032. 3 thousandths.
Thousandths.
Of a win. 3 thousandths of a win. Hey, but you're grinding edges, baby. You need those edges. But QB1 is the most valuable. On an actual WoRP per game basis, actually RB1 is better by 2 thousandths than the QB1. Which I think, to me, like what stands out is, we're doing a WoRP, so we're not punishing players for being injured. You know what I mean? Like the games aren't counting against them.
Exactly.
And historically, running backs are the ones who are going to get banged up the most. Now we've seen quarterbacks here in the last couple of years be cycled in and out and absolutely murdered. But running backs, historically, they might only play 7 games in a season, 10 games, 12 games. So they have 4 games that aren't counting against them.
I think what's kind of cool, though, Mike, is in this, well, obviously the names are not out, so it's just looking at the graph of the player distribution. Forget the names for a second, right? But I think what's cool is you probably, as you go through each individual year, you'll talk about different ways that the league was, like the actual NFL, right? This kind of gives you more of a true picture without going down one rabbit hole of, well, there was zone defense this year in court. Like, this is more of a bigger sample size so that you can – I think this is very good for conception right here, like for you to just look at it as a player distribution. Forget names. Look at what historically the lines are. I like this.
Well, we talked about with the quarterbacks episodes ago, right, Adam? Is this a trend or is this –
Is it here to stay? Yeah. Yep.
Is it here to stay? You know what I mean? Like, is this just something that we're going to see a one-off? We always hear about the NFL goes in cycles, right? Just cycles.
Yeah, copycat league,
It's a copycat league, but a lot of people like NFL historians will tell you, and I can tell you because I've looked at some of the numbers and stuff, but, go back to some of those 1970s teams and go look at the I don't remember if they were actually in San Diego at the time. The old Chargers, the Dan Fouts Chargers.
Yep.
Eric Coryell, right? Those ones. Go look at some of the passing numbers those teams were putting up in an era that you were like, oh, yeah, they're probably just birds in a cloud of dust, right? Yeah, man. Like, we're talking like 4,800, 4,900 yards, and it wasn't a 17-game season at that time. So it's absolutely nuts, the numbers they were putting up. And then we went to the running backs, ground and pound, play defense and stuff in the 80s. 90s was kind of a mix. You had the Cowboys come in, and they were like, man, look at this, how good this offense is. do yourself a favor and go look up how many passing yards Troy Aikman has for his career, like where he ranks. You're like, holy hell.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, he'd be trash in today's game.
I mean,
God awful.
Because it's a constant, like in anything, it's a, counter. You're seeing success, whether it's offense or defense, and you got to figure out a counter, and then now that counter stifles, and then they come back with their own counter. You're looking at that's why I like this 5-year sample size. Essentially, it takes those shifts and kind of mitigates like their immediate presence in the front of mind. Like last year, Mike, the quarterback scoring and specific players, certain things I would chase, like the top 5 quarterbacks matter in this. That was the case last year. Now, if you looked at a sample size like this and you're like, man, the top 5 quarterbacks or something like that, okay, we're having a different conversation. But I guess it helps mitigate or get rid of your thinking and just recency bias last year. Everyone's going to think about last year, the most case. So I like this a lot.
And you do see some wild stuff, right? Like we talked about, especially with quarterbacks. You go look at quarterback graphs in 2020 and 2021, they're through the roof. 22 and 23, not so much. Like they came back to earth, and last year was probably the worst year for quarterbacks. But I posed the question, what happens if we get back to a 2020 type season from the quarterbacks? What you're drafting in startups and where they're following right now is going to seem like incredible value, right? You're going to want to sell your soul for the Justin Herberts of the world, the Joe Burrows of the world, like possibly Justin Fields, like those, any quarterback who could potentially be in the top 12. It's going to be worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
And we're get right back into that conversation of like, would you rather have Justin Jefferson or like QB 11?
I think that's where like we had a discussion last night with Maddie, and basically, and you were making the cases and all the different historical times where it's like, dude, if you just take the quarterback in a superflex league more often than not versus the receiver, it's going to pay out. But it's like, and I agree, by the way, that's what it's been historically. But now we're like, it's almost, again, the recency bias is so strong. It's like, man, look at these startups. Like we're in this economy that's never existed before. Like this is literally a I don't know, like a COVID year, I guess. It's like what is this? I don't know. I'm inside all the time.
What's going on?
Wide receivers are way up high.
So the biggest takeaways, at least looking at this graph for me for this league, is
for the shit league, yeah.
Yeah, for historically, right? Like you want those top 12 quarterbacks just about at any cost. If you got a guy that you think is going to be a top 12, right? Pretty standard for 2024, that would be a guy that I want to invest in this league, in this format. If you're looking at just maybe 1-year windows, it's hard to project, but if you got a good feeling about Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan or Breece Hall or Christian McCaffrey repeating as RB1, they're going to produce very similarly to what the QB1 is. So like you could get incredible value there. Same for the wide receivers, but generally that quarterback line down to 12 sits above, any RB1 or wide receiver 1. Wide receiver 1's kind of separated themselves about 5, 6, and equivalent wide receivers are worth more than what an equivalent running back would be, right?
Yeah, so the further you go down, what you see too, this is where like our initial principles were, and where running back bullishness started in best ball, even before you go through all the different reasons why running backs fail, was Mike, you just in best ball, you ride that blue line all the way at the back end where it just, 24, it's better. 30, it's better versus replacements, right? I want wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 42, and I want all of them. Give me as many of these guys as you can.
You shoot your shot on the elite running backs, hoping that you nail a couple that are going to finish top 6.
And even in this league, to your point, even in this league, it's the green line does trail. By the way, I'm using colors if you're on podcast. The green line is the running backs. The blue is the wide receivers. The red is the quarterback. The green line trails in its third place technically, Mike. But look at that top 10, especially top 12, but the top 6 really. Like that line gets steep. You hit one of those guys and you have any type of a blend of the top 12 quarterbacks, it's going to be huge. Because you're looking at Mike at the top there in multi-year. This is one thing I think I probably will pay attention to in multi-year is what does the top options get to in the WoRPs per game. You get to 3. That's a big sample size showing you that you get the hammers in this league, and even in best ball, that's going to kill some people.
Yeah, you want to take them. And then like for quarterbacks, for me, it's like if I shoot for number 1 overall, number 2 overall, that kind of thing at quarterback, let's say I fall short, it's a top 6 quarterback. It's like ho hum, right? Top 6 quarterback. Still looking at a 2 WoRP, 2.1 to be exact, and it's like yes,
not so bad. Not so bad.
I did okay, right? How about the running back? So let's say you shoot for one of those top guys. Top 1 is a 3 WoRP.
Yeah.
Kind of a smaller window for you to hit it. Say if you got like RB3 though, that's already down to a 2.3 WoRP.
I was just gonna say, Mike, this line at running back speaks volumes to me. Like you go to 16, I'm looking at right now, 1.264. Like think about that. You're not even to the midway of running back 2. 1.264 to 3. That's crazy. That's a 5-year sample size.
Let's say you really miss and you just hit an RB1, right?
There you
Number
go.
12 overall.
Okay.
1.4 WoRP.
Right. Like
the risk.
It's half. Not even.
The risk now gets baked in where you're like, oh my gosh, the floor is so low if I'm wrong. Or this guy gets injured. What if he gets injured?
Well, Mike, to the point too of in best ball, like, okay, if you play the cards and you're playing the edges of, I'm looking to get as many running backs on my team that I think have a chance to workload, and then throughout the year, I'll shave out the guys that are roster cloggers or not getting work. But Mike, if you just keep doing that, because guess what, somebody in this league got a 3-type WoRP player out of a 25th round or a freaking free agent Kyron Williams. That type of a hammer made out of nothing is crazy. Fairy dust,
Fairy dust. Yeah.
Boom. Next thing you know, you got Kyron. Like that, where you or I maybe in years past, or maybe even this year, would be like, no, I think I like Aaron Jones a lot, and you draft him way higher, and this is the year that Aaron Jones doesn't really give you, Aaron Jones. Like that's
right.
A big difference in values and what happens in points per game. It's huge.
That's one like Kyron, right? Like it's one hit at the running back. What'd you have at the wide receiver? You had 2, Puka and Nico.
Like Tank wasn't
Tank
all the year, but you got guys like that. Yeah, to your point, right?
Game. Yeah. Yep. So you had 3 at the wide receiver. Did you have anybody like that at the quarterback?
You know what you had, Mike? Is you had all these guys that just picked up on waiver wires that you just in best ball. Mike, even if you didn't think it was the right play, if you just did it, those I bet you were teams that did not lose very often if they just stayed true to picking up waiver wire quarterbacks in best ball, because you're just going to have 4 or 5 of them, 6 of them,
Flacco,
one of them's going to hit. Like it's
Jake
crazy.
Browning later, yeah.
If you had I bet you this, if you had 3 or 4 quarterbacks and you did a good job of churning them. So I'm talking, you get a share of a Flacco later, you get a share of an Easton Stick. If you did that, just did that process, I bet you combine that WoRP. I bet you it's really good. I bet you it's really good.
The other big thing, as soon as you pull this up, Adam, is tight ends. Who cares?
Well, I was gonna say, man, it is so funny, Mike. The more and more I look at anything in WoRP, and the more I see stuff like, what in the world was I ever doing? Goodness, man. We could talk about running back chasing and all that, but look at this. What am I doing chasing, mid tight end 2s, brother? What? Isaiah Likely, no RAS score. No tight end up. What are we doing? Look at this line. You basically have what probably is going to be Kelsey Hawk, and then, you get lucky year to year that whoever's 3 to 6, and then it's like, okay, you did what this is all absolutely 100% worthless.
I think probably the only one, and we started with this with WoRP, right?
Yeah.
The only tight end, if you really had a good feeling about a Kelsey and Andrews, right? If you had a good feeling about them, maybe they're worth the price you had to pay in a startup or a trade to go get them for your league, in just your standard, half-point tight end premium league in a best ball.
Right. Yeah, sure.
But you talk about the running back floor being absolutely terrible if you're wrong. There were people who were very in on Dallas Goedert, and what he finished outside the top 12 this past year. Historically, that tight end WoRP is less than a game.
Yeah, it's funny because Mike, so, man, I don't want to let it all out of the bag. This is actually, you know what? No, this is going to come out on Saturday or Friday too. That's when the video drops. Mike, so Dallas Goedert is an interesting case relative to the last, 8 years. Now, Mike, so if you think 8 years top 12 tight end. So first of all, we know that the top 12 tight end doesn't mean, what is that what are we talking about? Tight end 12, tight end 8, tight end even 6 probably in a lot of leagues. Mike, 5 out of 8 years. Think about it. Zach Ertz is in his way a lot. There's offensive weapons all the time, but he's in points per game. 5 of the 8 years, top 12. But to your point, who that has done what for your dynasty or fantasy teams? Help you stay clogged, really. Like it's done nothing. Maybe a week you had a pop here and there, but just didn't matter.
I gotta pull it up. So I'm going to run the multi-year WoRP on Shit Savage because that's that 3-point
the 3 tight end premium. Yeah,
best ball league.
I'll run it too. I want to see this. I want to see this yellow line in the historical perspective.
Right. I want to see what it looks like for 5 years of data.
I mean, I do think, Mike, if you really juice it, you can make that line look different. But I think people don't understand how much you have to do that.
This was probably, I think you would agree, one of the best WoRP graphs for a tight end that I think you and I have ever seen.
It was all my leagues. It was the best I had.
Because you had kind of depressed scoring everywhere else. You didn't have to start one. It's a best ball league with tons of flex spots, and you get that 3-point per catch for tight ends. Like it is absolutely loaded. But we'll see when it pulls up here. I'm interested to see what the historical one, because just on a year-to-year basis over the last couple, it's actually been very, very good.
You're getting everybody listening. You know, you're getting if you're paying attention, you're getting a auditory or a visual of this. It has to run 5 times the data now. You know, let it run.
All right, not as good as I thought.
I mean,
kind of depressing.
Well, here's what I will say about it. Like
historic average, man.
Mike, shit Savage, like that yellow line's it's above the QBs.
Yes, historically, and above the number 1 wide receiver, but only for a few tight ends.
Yeah, like, okay, you know what, Mike, though, actually? So it's interesting. If you go back to the multi-year data versus the multi-year data, and then you go back to the multi-year graph, the players, I don't know if it changes much, but it actually does the graph. So that's kind of intriguing to me. I guess I got to get – see, that's the type of stuff when I see visual differences like that. Like, I know it's players versus the average, but, like, I wonder if Koopa can help me, make my brain compute that better. I don't.
What do you mean?
Like, if you look at the multi-year WoRP for the Shit Savage, right? Or the multi-year data, sorry. Let me just say, the multi-year data tab, okay?
Yep.
And it's very, it's uniformly, like, it looks erect. It's starting to get erect there, right? That's what it looks like. You go to the multi-year graph, and it's, I don't know why. Maybe it's frozen up now. Talk to me, Koopa. What did I do here? There's a little bit of difference in certain. It's overall looking similar, but there's difference in like certain peaks and stuff. So I'm curious, because the players are there versus the overall, just not using the player. You're just taking the numbers. I'm curious why they look slightly different. Not much, just ever so slightly.
Do you mean looking at like the recommended data tab versus a multi-year data tab?
Yes, I'm trying to get the. Well, now I'm getting frozen. Now I sound really dumb because nothing's on my screen. But
your recommended data tab is only pulling from 2023.
Yeah, I have right now. Well, again, I have nothing coming up. Let me see if I can.
That'll be the one with player names on it, right? It'll say Christian McCaffrey's the number 1 WoRP player in the whole league.
So let's go. You keep talking while I try to see if I can get my internet to pop.
But on mine, anyways, when you go to the multi-year data tab and you look at the multi-year graph, over 3 WoRP is a running back. Now, I think the running back scoring is pretty juiced in this league too. So 3.158 WoRP. Number 2 player is going to be the tight end position at 2.695, right? And you get one more tight end 2 in the top 10 at 2.33 or 2.303. Then you get another tight end at 16, 1.903. You get one at 18. So your top 4 tight ends are 1.8 or above, top 20 overall WoRP players. And then it really starts to kind of trail off. and fall.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Kind of trails. You get another one at 23, one at 27. It's starting to become a little bit more sporadic.
Yeah, I see what you mean now, by the way. I didn't have a visual. You're right. I was looking at a 1 year versus it's in the recommended data, and then it says multi-year graph. You're right.
Yeah, if you're on the recommended data tab, it's just looking at the last year, 2023.
Yeah, that slider bar isn't doing anything because it's under the recommended data, right? Got it.
Yep. You go to multi-year, it takes the names away. All of a sudden, you're looking at all the guys historically over the last 5 years. Now, tight ends, like, they do okay, and you're right. The elite ones, 1 and 2, above quarterbacks. Then it falls off at QB3. Like, QB3 historically is better than tight end 3 in WoRP. So if you're right, you can predict the Kelsey, right? Like, if you feel good about that. In this league, it would be worth it, I would think. Because you have a pretty big fall off then down to 12, right? 1.15 from a 2.6 something. That's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, I think see here's what I think about the multi-year data, Mike, to me. Anyway, the more and more I'm looking at it and just thinking about it, I think if you really like WoRP and use it a lot, which I think if you're, I mean, goodness, Mike, if you're listening to this podcast, that we've kind of forced you. You don't have much of a choice. Like, we love it. Sometimes I think, Mike, at least for me in the off season, especially, because what happens? There's narratives. There's the college. I at least personally, I'm sure you probably have, and maybe I'm speaking for you. You can over focus on specific idiosyncrasies in WoRP in a specific league, and it's like, all right, hold on, let me take a step back. Let me not overthink this for a second. Let's just take a step back, and then if you want to go back and look at it again. But I think the multi-year data, it's like, you know how if in your life, Mike, this is like a personal thing. If something happens to you in the moment, you may be too close to it to really see the bigger picture, right? And so you're in the moment, your emotions, whatever the case may be. But if you get further away from it, right, and you're like, man, why was I mad about that, or what? Why did that even come up? That was stupid. Like, you start, it's getting yourself away from it a little bit, and you can kind of see, okay, to your point. Yeah, I'll look at 1 year and say the tight ends were really great, but really 5 years, it's still good. But to your point, that is the best tight end WoRP we have. And in a 5-year sample size, it's not like, holy crap, tight ends run the league.
No, it's kind of mid. Like,
right.
if I was gonna look at this league and I wanted to build a contender at him, it's like you talked about on the previous one. Look at the running back wide receiver line historically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you're like, hey, you would just take a bunch of shots on wide receivers later. It's like, why in this league aren't you taking a bunch of shots on running backs later too? Right?
Well, that's
really where you should invest it in. I think at the tight end, maybe you try to shoot for the upside, right? You try to shoot for the Kelseys, the Andrews, like those elite guys, the Hawks of the world. And then everything else, it's just like, just give me dudes, just give me bodies, because the rest of my effort is going to be put into the fact that I'm trying to hit a multitude of running backs and wide receivers in those ranges. And I think if you were smart, like your startup draft would look something along the lines of securing elite quarterbacks that you felt safe about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just so you don't suffer that fall off down to QB 24, which is god awful, horrible, just like tight end.
Yeah, you're right. It's actually it's on the line of tight end. That's pretty telling.
And then the next thing you try to shoot for is, you know, let me see if I can nail one of these top tight ends, one or two of these guys. And then everything else, like how you should roster construct, should just be throwing stuff at running backs and wide receivers, all of them. And in season while you're trading, you know, if a Christian McCaffrey becomes available, he's the number one WoRP running back because it just smacks so hard versus everything else. You're like, yeah, that's the hammer that I'm going to go try to get. That's the one I'm going to try to get.
I like that call. I think, too, to your point, man, you talk about this is where tight ends really matter. Now, I guess, honestly, this would probably more so than anything to me tell me that the quarterbacks at certain ranges don't. But, man, that's crazy. Tight end 24 in the graph that's significantly lower than the running backs and the receivers. And you're telling me basic quarterback 24 is tight end 24. That's like, holy mackerel. I want high end quarterbacks, or I don't care, right? That's nuts. That's a 5-year sample size.
So last thing before we bounce, go look at the multi-year roster construction for this league and tell me if that don't line up almost exactly with what I was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, look at it. You're looking at...
With the two smallest numbers for positions are what? Quarterback and wide receiver. Meaning you want to invest in heavy hitters early, right? Like you want to be secure, try to shoot for the upside at those positions.
Wait, it has am I looking at the wrong? It has 13.5. What I'm looking at for wide receiver.
No. I said the smallest number is quarterbacks and tight ends. Sorry.
Oh,
I didn't say tight end.
You might have misspoke. It's okay. I got you. You're 100% right. Yeah, quarterbacks and by the way, that's 11. That's 12, and that's less than those combined is less than the receiver. That's crazy.
Right. The two biggest numbers are at running back and wide receiver.
Exactly. Yep.
Meaning those are the plethora of late round guys that you really want to start throwing darts at.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it lines up exactly what you're talking about. And that's a pretty decent if you're on podcast, we can try to give you stuff, but some of this is visually. Like you just see that visually on a 5-year sample size, Mike. You kind of think through it like you just did, and look, it's pretty. Don't get carried away here. Just be running backs and receivers, man. Yeah, don't.
Like, so if you told me I had to form a draft strategy off of the graph, the table, and the roster construction, how I'm thinking of it in my head is, if I'm in a startup, hypothetically, we're not doing trades. I'm not, moving back or whatever. But if this was a fresh startup with these league settings, exactly, Adam, my first 4 rounds better be 2 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends.
Ooh, that's interesting too.
And then everything else that comes after it is like, I'm gonna get my 3rd quarterback at some point. I'm gonna get that 4th just flyer quarterback. I'm gonna get that 3rd tight end. Kind of just fill it out to get that number to 7 when the value is right. But everything else I should be focusing on is like, who's the best available running back, who's the best available wide receiver. Check.
It's interesting as you're talking about this too. I'm like, man, this is one of those two where, Mike, for us, this is where in a large portfolio, I would end up spending. It wasn't large relative to yours, but for me, that was the largest I had. It was like 30 leagues or something. I would spend a lot of time doing that. Like, oh man, this is one where I got to be really careful not to basically try to play up quarterback leverage, which for me is like a tendency. Right, like that's if I see there's a weakness in quarterback leverage, like I'm gonna overgo there, and I'm like, this is not the one you want to have them 7 quarterbacks, buddy. Like that's just a recipe for disaster, right? So I think that is where WoRP is really big. Now for me, I was having a hard time balancing all that and then implementing it, but to the point is that this is where if you use this WoRP tool. This is where you can clearly differentiate, okay, if this is something you do, like Mike and I, we are the same. We want to leverage quarterbacks. Okay, but you better not do it in this damn league. Or you better understand that the economy in the league, they have no idea that this is the WoRP line because you don't want to get stuck with that bag. Dude, if you had a bunch of quarterbacks in like 18 to 24, those are dead assets, bro. Like for production anyway, right? Like
terrible.
Oof. That's kind of crazy. I wouldn't have guessed. And like you said, there was depressed assets. I probably even looking at the graph didn't realize how bad it got for quarterback in this league relative to everybody else.
It
really
makes
bad.
You want.
Yeah.
Really makes you want to secure the highly efficient, the repeaters.
You know what else is another?
We know the same names, right? For the most part.
Sure.
Joe Burrow is going to be in there. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson,
if you can
Jalen Hurts.
I was just going to say, though, that what's interesting, too, is this is where you could probably, depending on who you're playing with, or just send out offers. You don't even have to go dynamics of the league by this. Mike, this is where I'd probably be aggressive in what looks like in a best ball league tier-ups. Let me go get Jalen Hurts in this league. Here goes, I don't know. Give me mid quarterbacks. I'll throw you David. Yeah, of course I'll throw you David Carr. Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins in a heartbeat. I mean, obviously, that probably doesn't get it done, but give me 2 mid quarterbacks and maybe even a little juicer, and I can get into that elite quarterback. That's the only reason I care is to get those. So
now that you see this over multi-year too, we did have a trade on the trade show recently from this league. If you remember that,
which one was it?
I tiered down from C.J. Stroud, so I sent away Stroud, Jordan
Addison. Yeah, you got Love, right?
The 111, and I got Love, Garrett Wilson, and the 107.
Yeah, I remember it. Yep. Ooh, that's a good call.
What do you think about that now, looking at the WoRP for this league?
I pulled it up at the end there. especially with multi-year WoRP, we got to start bringing it, I think, a little more every time, because that, again, would have made it. I think I was already on your side, but now it's like, okay, dude, what are we doing? I guess so, the only caveat would be if you – Jordan Love, to me, this year showed that he's not going to be in that bottom or yucky tier. Like, that's the only difference if he ends up being that. I love it for you. 107 is a pick that could be relevant, though. Look at that. That 24 wide receivers.
So let's just look at rosy outcomes for every player in that deal. Like rosiest on each side.
Highest
Absolute
upside,
smashes.
sure.
What's CJ Stroud's highest upside? With what you know about him with his game, rushing floor, that kind of stuff. What's his rosiest outcome? 4,900 yard, 35 touchdowns.
I mean,
like that.
I would say like his rosiest outcome, like I think he could, if the weapons were to improve, he could give you a Herbert season. But that's gonna be.
So he could hit that 20 point per game. Maybe he's QB3 or QB4.
Yeah, I'd say probably I would say quarterback 5. He's definitely in his outcomes. Depending on the year, he could end up being 3 or 2 if it was a mid-year year for quarterbacks.
So just average, he's gonna be around a 1.7, 1.8 WoRP.
Yeah, I think quarterback 5 is a fair assessment.
Okay. What about Jordan Love?
Rosiest outside, like the best thing happens. Mm-hmm. I think you probably can't say it's that far off from CJ Stroud.
Yeah. All right. So QB 5-ish.
QB 5, 7, 8. I mean, yeah, you want to take it down a hair, but it's the same, really. If everything hits right, I think it's very similar.
What about a Jordan Addison?
Rosiest outcomes. I mean, I think the rosiest outcomes for him requires an injury. But if that happens, like if Jettis was gone, or there's a scenario where he's got 8 games where he's the wide receiver 1, and maybe he's a top 12-ish receiver, something like that.
That's fair. Let's say wide receiver 1. That seems pretty rosy.
No, I am, but I'm also trying to make sure it is like.
No, I'm with you. That's what I wanted to get at. Like,
yeah.
We don't wish it or anything. You're definitely not projecting it, but
right.
If Jefferson went down for a good stretch, he's the only option. They got good quarterback play. Yeah, you could see him putting up a wide receiver 1 season next year.
Yeah, certainly.
So it's about a 1.3 WoRP. What about for Garrett Wilson?
I mean, I guess I don't know. Now I'm getting all uncomfortable because the rosiest of upsides is he's hitting high end WoRP.
Adams with Aaron Rodgers levels.
He's hitting. You got to put him in the top 5, I think, if he's hitting. If you're telling me the rosiest of outcomes happens, that means the quarterback play goes up. That means all the targets and stuff stay. I think top 5 is in the range of outcomes for sure in the rosiest of outcomes.
So that's a 1.7 WoRP at top 5.
So
it's a half a game more.
1.7 versus 1.3 with Addison. Okay.
That's the only differentiator we've had between the two right now.
Right.
Is a half game of WoRP.
Yep. Or 0.5, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. 111. Say it's Keon. It's Adonai. One of those type wide receivers. Troy Franklin. Whoever it could be. Just pick that next tier of wide receivers.
What's the outcome for them? Rosiest? I mean,
next year.
Oh, in the WoRP perspective.
Yeah. Like where would they finish?
If they smack, I mean, probably. I think 15's bullish, like 15 to 18, mid wide receiver 2. I
can bet 15. So that's about a 1.2 WoRP. All right.
Now, again, these are shooting for it, right? These are rosy.
Hypothetically, we're talking rosy situation.
Everybody hits, right? No, I'm with you. I get you.
The 107 ends up being Brock Bowers.
I mean, if Brock Bowers hits, buddy, I mean, we just saw Sam Laporta break the rookie record, so you gotta give him Sam Laporta-esque type stuff. So
tight end 2-ish.
I mean, yeah, tight end. Put it at the high. Put it up there.
I won't go 1 because that's like Travis Kelce historic, but a rookie year from Brock Bowers, if he hit like Sam Laporta, it's tight end 2.
That's a whole nother conversation for tight end, by the way.
2.3 WoRP.
Woo. Really? Wow.
2.3 WoRP from a wide receiver that you're talking about who would hit at 1.2. So you're at, a game and a half of WoRP, a 1.5. You're essentially like a wide receiver.
That's in the multi-year
difference
you're looking at?
Yeah, that's the multi-year just average. So didn't have the multi-year when I was looking at it, but I was just looking not historically, but just kind of getting a feel of some of these values. So when I talk about that trade, it's like, how could you send away C.J. Stroud for Jordan Love? And I'm like, well, if I look at great upside for both of these guys, like if they were to both smack, they're both very similar, right? Like they're going to be within the same range. It's not like C.J. Stroud has Lamar Jackson's legs where that differentiates him from Jordan Love, because it's like, well, shit, what if he does come out and throw for 4,000 yards, but he also runs for 800 yards and 10 touchdowns? Like, that's a ceiling that's elite, right? That's Jalen Hurts stuff. That's Josh Allen stuff.
Yeah.
Very different, right? You comparing C.J. Stroud and Jordan Love, in all reality, one just has a little more stink on him over the last couple of years. Now it's starting to come off, but they're very similar. There's a difference between Jordan Addison smashing and a difference between Garrett Wilson smashing, for sure. Right? One's the number one in their offense.
Yeah, true. That's fair. That's a very good point, actually. Yeah, I like it.
You could say there's a reason we all have Garrett Wilson ranked above Jordan Addison, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, 100%, dude. Yes, very much.
And then the 111 and the 107, that factors into play. Like, rosiest of situations, you get the best choice of wide receiver at the 111, even if it is Brian Thomas. Adam, like, what is your ceiling on Brian Thomas versus what your ceiling is in this format on a Brock Bowers, if that was the pick at 107?
I think the only – well, to your point there, if you got if in this league Brock Bowers falls to 107, shame on people like that, in my opinion. It's one of the few places, Mike, where you and I both are like, yeah, I'm gonna take Brock Bowers in this mix. Probably almost in every other league, we're not taking Brock Bowers in that 107 mix. So now, if it doesn't happen, I guess here's the conversation on the flip side. If let's say Brock Bowers goes at like 105, 104, like I think I don't know what the league. I'm not going to use the term sharp leagues, because I think every sharp league has stupid trades and stupid picks. And I think that you never know what's going to happen. But I would think that he doesn't get to the 107. So if that doesn't happen, now what is your receiver pick, or what is the player pick of 107 versus the 111? That would be the other conversation.
Here's the added thing that I love.
Talk to me.
I already you talked about, like, if he goes 104 or 105.
Right.
I have the 104.
Are you doing that?
You might. Just sitting here talking about this, yes. I might just take Brock Bowers at 104, and then 107, all of a sudden it's like, hey, your worst case is neighbors or doomsday.
You know what's so funny, man? I was
going to consider at the 4 anyways.
I have been light on, when I say light on sleep, no sleep. I've been in tight end la land, Mike, in this document. What's crazy is we talk so much about how they don't matter, so that's why why am I investing in overall the arching theme for tight end? Really, when you really start to like dig all the way into it, why am I investing and why am I shooting high draft capital when really when they hit in most leagues, the payoff doesn't really give me the cash, right? It doesn't give me the production that I've invested in if it all hits. This is one of the scenarios where the economy for Brock Bowers, I think, is going to be interesting regardless, probably pretty buzzy. But the fact that production could pay off for him, I think this is probably the only conversation where you have a chance at it. So we probably would be like, if you didn't show us this WoRP graph and go down this lane, I bet you we'd be laughing at someone telling us this. But now that you look at it and you're like 2.3 WoRP historically, let's even call it 2, Mike. 2.2s, whatever. Like, you're talking about, that's what you want in anything. You want that high-end receiver to hit that. Like, that's what you're shooting for. Who cares if it's coming from Brock Bowers or what it's coming from? Like, 2+ in WoRP, that's what I want. 104, 107, like that's what I want. So I'm with you there. I get it.
Yep. Interesting conversation here. I do love it. Go check out the Multi-Year WoRP. Cooper introduced it. One of the first, improvements of 2024 that he's put in.
Yeah.
There's more to come. There's more to come. This is awesome. This is awesome, too, just to take names out of it for me and look at historical data. It really is. And it's probably how I'm going to use most of my WoRP going forward, too. Is I want to separate myself because there's inherent bias when I go and look at 2023 WoRP Adam, and I hover over.
Same with 22. Same with any year, exactly.
For example, I'll use it in analysis to besmirch the good name of Brock Purdy sometimes, right? Like, oh, well, look how bad the quarterback line was. I don't really care about the QB7 thing in WoRP. I look at a 5-year average. I really do care about where QB7's finishing in WoRP.
Correct. Because last year the whole quarterback line was dipped basically everywhere except for maybe 1 and 2. So I get you. I think too. What's interesting about this is, I think, remember when you would go back every now and again and look at 20. We'd be looking at that point. Last year we were looking at 21 season, right? And you maybe go to 20 season, and you're like, yeah, I get it. I see the quarterback lines here, but historically, this might be not that predictive. And this is, you don't have to click all them buttons and try to figure out what you look in a different year. Here it is. Boom. Really clean visual. And Mike, if you have been following this show long enough, you know that what we end up liking to do is remove the player name, remove the bias, get that out of there. That's the process. That's 4D. So when you're using multi-year WoRP, you're getting yourself ahead of league mates. And just remember, when your league mates are playing chess, play 4D chess.
Appreciate everybody tapping in. We'll be back here same time, same place next week for another edition of the 4D Chess Dynasty Podcast, and we hope y'all enjoyed the new cold opens. All right? We're not going to force them. They're going to be natural. But welcome into the family. Welcome into the 4D family. South Harmon family. Appreciate y'all. We're out of this thing. Peace.
Peace.